Today on TimesCast, days before Greece's parliament votes to avoid default, demonstrators took to the streets. Activists prepare a second flotilla to Gaza, leveraging the media's glare against Israeli policy. And on Wall Street, support for President Obama is kept out of the public eye.
There's a sense that even though people aren't necessarily giving him money so publicly, and they don't necessarily want to be seen as supporting him, given what he's been saying, that privately they may ultimately turn around and vote for him.
This is Rachel Donadio reporting for the New York Times in Athens. I'm standing just south of Syntagma Square, the square in front of the Parliament building, where today the Greek Parliament is debating some key austerity measures that they've been asked to pass in the next few days before their foreign lenders will give them the money they need to stave off bankruptcy. There are huge demonstrations going on today. It's the first day of a two-day general strike called by unions, and a couple hundred meters up I see police skirmishing with some protesters. They're firing lots of tear gas, which is wafting over the crowds and making its way slowly south to where I'm standing. But on the edges here, there are a lot of peaceful protesters. They've come to just vent their grievances at a government they feel has betrayed them. Greece has a pretty healthy tradition of street protest, and this is no exception. It's a country with a particular history. It ended World War II with a civil war. It had a military dictatorship from 1967 to 74. People protested against that, and there's really this tradition of taking to the streets, raising your fist, and the Greek police have traditionally fired tear gas on these crowds to thin them out. There's a small possibility that the austerity measures will not pass because of dissent within the ranks of the Socialist Party itself. Obviously, it's difficult for a socialist government to push through these austerity measures that include essentially going after the unions at the heart of their constituency. So some lawmakers have said they're considering voting against them. The general sense is that probably at the end of the day, the government will rally and pass the measures, but it's going to come down to a few key votes tomorrow.
For a second time, activists are preparing to counter the Israeli Navy's blockade of Gaza.
This is Ethan Braun reporting from Jerusalem. Israel is waiting right now for a group of boats to set sail probably in the coming 2 days. Their goal is to challenge Israel's control over the waters of Gaza, over its naval blockade.
All the way to Gaza, we're gonna let it sail.
A year ago, there was a similar group of boats, 6 of them, Turkish-run, and it did not end well. Israel, in an effort to stop those boats, boarded the largest of them, met resistance on board, and 9 activists on board were killed by Israeli commandos. That event actually caused quite a change in Israel's policy. There was enormous international outrage. There was condemnation in the Security Council of the United Nations. And Israel, as a result, started to allow many more kinds of goods into Gaza. So in an odd way, while this is a kind of media circus in the sense that we know that these boats are going to be stopped at sea and are not going to get through, and we know that they're not bringing vast amounts of humanitarian aid, we do know at the same time that the challenge, political challenge that the last flotilla gave to Israel did create a change on the ground for Gaza.
And DealBook's Evelyn Russley and Andrew Ross Sorkin discuss President Obama's relationship with Wall Street heading into the 2012 presidential campaign.
Wall Street is showing some reluctance to commit to Obama, but they may not be deserting him en masse yet, right?
The conventional wisdom is somehow that Wall Street has completely turned its back on Obama, that they're not supporting him, they're not giving him money, they're not doing anything. I think privately, despite all of the rhetoric, there's a sense that even though people aren't necessarily giving him money so publicly, that privately they may ultimately turn around and vote for him. In this environment, there's 2 issues. One is that many of the CEOs themselves, as I said before, don't want to be put in a position where they're looking like they're supporting somebody who's obviously coming down on their businesses in terms of financial reform and everything else. The other side, which is almost ironic, is that the idea that Obama and Lloyd Blankfein are going to be in a photo spread together, as one banker said to me, isn't good for either of them.
But there is some tension between Wall Street and Obama, right? How do you read the polls today? Where would you say, Wall Street is generally speaking? Are they happy with Obama?
I think they're privately okay with Obama.
Okay.
I think they're saying, it hasn't been nearly as bad as it might have been. The other element that's so interesting is the sort of box Obama's in, which is, on the left, liberals really believe he hasn't done enough. And on, the right, or within Wall Street at least, there's this sense that he's already done too much. And so the question is, what do you do?
So how will this shake out in the next election cycle?
Well, we might not be seeing people jump in to support people this early in the race. We're going to find out who the Republican candidate is. If it's Mitt Romney, I think that's somebody that Wall Street can ultimately live with. If it's Michelle Bachmann, I think that's actually going to be a much tougher sell, and you might see a lot more support for Obama. So ultimately, I think you're going to see a lot of money come into this campaign, and you're going to see people making multiple bets because, as they say in the business, they like to hedge their bets.